For years, there has been one sentence that has hovered over Linux like a curse, repeated in comment sections, tech forums, and casual conversations alike. Linux is great, but it can't run Windows apps. That single limitation has shaped public perception more than any other technical detail. More than package managers, desktop environments, or even gaming. And now, suddenly, headlines are popping up everywhere, claiming something wild, something almost unbelievable. Linux just got a feature that changes everything. Windows apps now run natively. No virtual machines, no dual boot, no compromises. And if you're skeptical, good, you should be, because the truth here is far more interesting than the hype, and far more important than a simple yes or no answer. To understand why this moment matters, we need to rewind a little. Linux has always been technically capable. In many ways, it has been ahead of Windows for decades. Stability, security, flexibility, transparency, these were never the problem. The problem was gravity, software gravity. Windows accumulated applications over 30 years, and that ecosystem became its strongest moat. People didn't use Windows because they loved Windows. They used Windows because Photoshop was there, because Office was there, because proprietary enterprise tools were there, because their printer drivers were there. Linux users learned to live without, to find alternatives, to rewire workflows that built a strong community. But it also built a wall that most regular users never wanted to climb. For a long time, Linux's answer was simple but unsatisfying. Use native alternatives. GIMP instead of Photoshop. LibreOffice instead of Microsoft Office. Kdenlive instead of Premiere Pro. And while these tools are impressive, and in many cases excellent, they didn't solve the psychological barrier. People didn't want replacements. They wanted continuity. They wanted their files to open the same way, their shortcuts to behave the same way, their workflows to survive the jump intact. Then came Wine. Wine was revolutionary, even if most people didn't realize it at the time. Not an emulator, but a compatibility layer, a clever translation system that re-implemented Windows APIs on top of Linux. It was brilliant in concept and rough in execution. Some apps worked perfectly. Others almost worked. Many didn't work at all. Configuration was painful. Debugging was arcane. And for years, Wine remained something you tried, failed with, and then told yourself Linux wasn't ready yet. Fast forward again, and something changed. Valve entered the scene not as a Linux evangelist, but as a company that needed Linux to succeed. SteamOS was never about ideology. It was about control. Valve didn't want its future locked behind Windows decisions, Windows updates, or Windows licensing. So they invested heavily in Wine, poured engineering talent into it, and rebranded a supercharged version as Proton. Suddenly, thousands of Windows games worked on Linux with a click. Not because Linux magically learned Windows code, but because the translation layer became so refined, so optimized, that for the end user, the distinction stopped mattering. That was the first crack in the wall. What's happening now is the second. Today, modern Linux distributions ship with kernel features, graphic stacks, container systems, and runtime environments that are so mature, so performant, and so invisible that the line between native and compatible has become blurry. And that's where the controversy starts. Because technically, no, Linux did not suddenly gain the ability to execute Windows binaries directly at the kernel level. There is no secret NT subsystem hiding inside the Linux kernel, but practically, functionally, experientially, something profound has happened. Windows applications on Linux no longer feel like guests. They feel like citizens. When you install a Windows app through Proton, Bottles, or modern Wine frontends today, you are not entering a hacky science experiment. You're clicking install and running software at near-native performance. GPU acceleration works, audio works, input works, high DPI scaling works, Wayland support is improving. File dialogues integrate with the Linux file system. From the user's perspective, the question is this. Native starts to lose meaning. And this is where the title stops being clickbait and starts being philosophical. What does native actually mean anymore? If an application launches instantly, performs within a few percentage points of Windows, integrates with your desktop, respects your hardware, and doesn't require a virtual machine, is it meaningfully different from native? For developers, yes. For purists, yes. For lawyers, absolutely. But for users, not really. And operating systems live or die by user perception. The Linux kernel itself has quietly evolved to support this shift. Features like improved file system performance, better memory management, Futex enhancements, and cutting-edge scheduler improvements all contribute to smoother compatibility layers. Graphics drivers, especially Mesa, have reached a level where DirectX calls translated to Vulkan often outperform their original Windows implementations. That's not a joke, that's real benchmarking data. In some cases, Linux is running Windows games faster than Windows itself. That flips the old narrative on its head. For decades, Linux was the system you used despite its limitations. Now it's becoming the system you used because it removes limitations. No forced updates, no ads in the start menu, no telemetry you didn't consent to, no artificial hardware requirements. And now, increasingly, no application lock-in either. This is why Windows users are quietly switching, not loudly, not dramatically, quietly. One install at a time, one laptop at a time, one frustrated update at a time. They don't announce it on Twitter, they don't argue in forums, they just realize that the thing keeping them on Windows no longer holds the same power. Their games work, their tools work, their peripherals work, and suddenly, Linux isn't a sacrifice, it's an upgrade. Microsoft sees this, by the way. That's why Windows Subsystem for Linux exists. That's why Windows is embracing Linux tooling instead of fighting it. That's why Azure runs more Linux than Windows. The irony is almost poetic. Linux didn't conquer Windows by replacing it. It outgrew it. And yet, it's important to stay grounded. Linux is not secretly running Windows code natively. There is no magic switch you can flip. Compatibility layers still exist. Some apps still break. Anti-cheat systems, DRM, deeply kernel-tied software can still cause problems. Enterprise workflows still lag behind, but the direction is unmistakable. This isn't about Linux becoming Windows. It's about Linux making Windows irrelevant. When software portability improves, when open standards dominate, when Vulkan replaces DirectX exclusivity, when cross-platform frameworks like Electron, Qt, and .NET blur boundaries even further, operating systems lose their monopoly power, and Linux thrives in that world because Linux was built for interoperability from day one. The real feature that changed everything isn't a checkbox or a kernel patch, it's maturity. It's the moment when the Linux ecosystem stopped apologizing and started delivering. It's the moment when the question shifted from, can Linux run this, to, why am I still tolerating Windows? For the Linux Chronicle audience, this is the story worth telling. Not hype, not fear-mongering, not tribalism. Just the quiet realization that the rules have changed. Linux didn't suddenly wake up with a Windows compatibility miracle. It spent 20 years laying the groundwork, and now that groundwork is paying off all at once. So when someone asks, do Windows apps run natively on Linux now? The honest answer is no. And also yes, no, in theory, yes in practice. And the gap between those two answers is shrinking faster than anyone expected. That's not just a feature, that's a shift. And once shifts like this begin, they don't reverse.